Greetings and salutations and welcome once again back into the record room. And this is a brand new episode this week. I know I've been absent for the last couple of weeks, but that's because I've been on the road traveling, and I was actually over in Memphis, Tennessee in the good old US of A. And it was my first time there, so I did do some sightseeing, went to Graceland and did some very interesting things. But the most important thing I probably did there, or the reason that you're probably here, is I did hit up a couple of rather excellent record stores while I was there. In fact, there are two record stores in Memphis, Tennessee that are recommended. If you see any sort of record buying guides, these stores are recommended. And even the first hotel I was in, they had a little guidebook of things you could do in Memphis, and both record stores were actually listed on there. So pretty, they must be good if they're listed in a guide. That's the way I see it. So I did go and spend some time in both of those stores, probably a little bit longer than than your average record going public, but you know, I was there. I don't know when I'm going to be back in Memphis, so I took as long as I possibly could. And one of the stores, you can see from my awesome shirt here, was Shangri-La, and the other is called Goner Records, and they both sell a mix of new and old records, as well as tapes and CDs and merch and things of that matter. But I thought what I'd do over the next couple of episodes is basically go through everything I bought. I did actually buy a fair amount of records. I think I counted yesterday, I brought home 31 records. Well, I didn't bring home, actually, I shouldn't say that. Whenever I go away, if I buy a quantity of records, I ship them back home because it's way cheaper than sending them or taking them as carry-on luggage, or having to buy an additional case or paying for the extra luggage, and they're going to get damaged being thrown around by baggage handlers. So yeah, I shipped them home. So they came home a couple of days after I did. But I do have a mix of old and new stuff, primarily older stuff, pre-owned stuff, used records. And I found some really cool stuff that I had been looking for. You know, I kind of have a mental list in my head, as I'm sure most of you out there do as well, of records that when you see them out in the wild, you'll grab them. And so I'm not going to make a feature-length movie episode where I discuss all 31 records in one go. I'm going to break it down into bite-sized chunks, and I picked out the 5 records I cleaned first, basically, because, you know, with used records, there is a chance you can look at them in a store and it looks okay. You get it home and it sounds awful. Pops and clicks and scratches and this, that and the other. One of the benefits to having an ultrasonic cleaner or an Okinoki or any kind of record cleaner is that you can walk into a record store that does have used records, look at something, and if it looks a bit dirty, but the price is right, sure, you can take it home, clean it, and you've got some nice stuff. And everything I've got here, I've cleaned and I've listened to, and they sound like they were pressed a couple of days ago. It's fantastic. You know, the records look warm. They look like they've been played and loved, and I like that. I like it when a record looks like it's had a life, but I like it to sound good. And luckily enough, so far, all of the used records that I've cleaned up and played have all sounded fantastic. So let's get into some of the picks that I picked up. And I warn you now, they are diverse. They are all over the musical stratosphere. there is not one clear theme here. There were things that I saw that were cheap and I thought, I'll take a chance, and there were things that I was like, I've been looking for that. So kicking off with an album I have been looking for. I do own this album actually on cassette. I picked up a cassette of this a few years back, actually, while I was in Los Angeles on a trip, and I love this album so much that I'm quite glad I was able to pick it up on vinyl. And these albums are being reissued, but there's something about, I love the original copies. And first up is Van Halen's Diver Down. Now, I know this is not considered like a Van Halen classic, a lot of cover versions, but I love this record. There's just something about this record. Their cover version of Pretty Woman, the Roy Orbison song, I think is fantastic. I think it's better than the original. I really do. It's a really great cover version. And even their version of Dancing in the Street. All right, it's not as good as the original, but it's pretty darn close. And this one does have a little bit of sleeve damage, a little bit of damage there on the sleeve, but I paid $17.99 for this. So I'm not even sure what that works out to in UK pounds, probably 13, 14 pounds, something like that. No brainer for a first press US copy. Does have the original inner sleeve as well, which is nice. And again, it's nice thick cardboard sleeve, as they were back in the day. And the record itself, it's been cleaned up and it's been cranked. And it sounds great. I mean, I don't know how well it's going to come across on camera, but I tell you now, there is like virtually no noise on this record. It is so clean. It's obviously been played and loved, or played and liked maybe, but yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing. 1982 Warner Brothers Records, Van Halen, Diver Down, produced by Ted Templeman, who, by just you know, bit of an offshoot, Ted Templeman has a fantastic book available where he talks about all the records he's produced and his life as a producer, but he talks a lot about Van Halen, which I'm a fan of, because I am a fan of the mighty Van Halen, as you can imagine. There were a couple of other Van Halen albums I saw out there that I didn't pick up because I wasn't 100% sure what I actually have, but I know I didn't have Diver Down. So for me, absolute no-brainer, as was picking up a somewhat controversial LP, Black Sabbath's Born Again. Now, I know there are people that just cannot stand Black Sabbath without Ozzy or without Dio. I understand both of those singers. I mean, Ozzy, there is no comparison. And Dio, for my money, Dio was the best vocalist ever in Black Sabbath. That might be controversial coming from an Englishman, but for me, Dio is just a better vocalist than Ozzy. He just is. He's just a better singer. And I think the songs they did, Black Sabbath with Dio, are just superb. I really, really do. But there's something about Born Again I really love. You know, Ian Gillan's an amazing vocalist. He is an amazing vocalist. You know, go back, listen to some Deep Purple. It's killer stuff. But him joining Black Sabbath, yeah, maybe a little bit controversial at the time. But man, this album is killer. And again, this is a US first press. It's got some great songs on this one as well. Zero the Hero being a personal favorite of mine. I paid $24.99 for this, so about 20 quid, but again, it's nice original thick sleeve, Warner Brothers Records, because that was the label they were on in the US, and it does come with its original inner sleeve as well. Lyrics on one side. Don't know if you'll be able to see that because it's quite bright. It's actually a really, really nice copy of this album. You know, a little bit of wear and tear, but on an album that is, when did this come out? 1983. So an album that is 41 years old. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. And again, I mean, this thing has got a lot of scratches, but when you're playing it, ooh-wee, you can't really tell. And that's the main thing for me, is sound quality. You know, I'm buying these records because I want to listen to them. They don't have to look stone cold. Like you can see there's some pretty hefty marks on this record, but I'm not sure if that's from overplay or from dismay. I'm not sure. But for me, this is brilliant and it sounds great as well. And you know, when I'm listening to Sabbath, I'm not listening to it at a polite volume. I'm cranking it up. So, you know, I want to hear it and I want it to sound good, and that one actually does. My next pick, this is an album that wasn't necessarily on a list, but was kind of in the back of my mind. So I don't know how many years ago it was now, less than 10 years ago. There was a horror movie called You're Next, which I thoroughly recommend. It's a great low budget indie horror film. Very, very good, very fun, good movie, great score as well. However, there's a song right at the start of the film. In the start of the film, there's kind of this, I don't want to say a murder, it's the aftermath of a murder scene. And there was a song playing on a CD in that scene. And the song is by the Dwight Twilley Band, and the song is called Looking for the Magic. And when I first saw the film, the biggest takeaway I had was, great film, love that song at the start of the movie. So I went hunting down and found the song, and I've streamed it so many times. And unfortunately, it wasn't released in the UK as a single. And, you know, importing a copy of the single just seems silly. It was quite expensive for what it was. But again, you know, kind of fold it away in the back of my mind, that Dwight Twilley Band, Looking for the Magic, great song. If I ever come across it in the world, maybe I'll pick it up. And well, I did manage to grab a copy of the album that the song is on. Dwight Twilley Band, Twilley Don't Mind. Now, Dwight Twilley might not be a name that many of you are familiar with. And he wasn't like a big star in the US, but his music, he was kind of on the cusp of breaking through a few times, I believe, throughout his career. And if you're a fan of like Tom Petty or Hall & Oates, but less Blue-Eyed Soul and more rock and roll, you might want to check out Dwight Twilley Band, because this is great late 70s pop rock and roll AOR. It's really good, catchy stuff. And I believe Tom Petty actually plays guitar on the song Looking for the Magic. This is actually a cutout version. You can see there it's got the sword, or the double cut, because it has the V in it as well there. So this one is on Arista Records, 1977. And this is actually, I've just seen in the bottom here, CRC. That's the Columbia Record Club. So when you used to see those ads in old magazines, you know, send us a penny and we'll send you 10 albums. This would have been produced for that program. So you go, Dwight Twilley Band there. And Looking for the Magic is by far and away my favorite track on the album, but the album itself is great. And it does have its original inner sleeve, which does include the lyrics to the songs. And if I look here, Tom Petty guitar on Looking for the Magic. So there you go. I mean, Tom Petty, who doesn't love Tom Petty? You'd be hard pressed to find a person that doesn't love Tom Petty. And this album, very reminiscent of some of Mr. Petty's work. And again, it looks like it's led a life, but it sounds amazing. This was actually the first thing I cleaned up, because being a fan of Looking for the Magic, I thought, well, is there anything else like that on the album? And there are a few songs that are equally as good as Looking for the Magic. And I don't know what it was. Mr. Twilley, I believe there was, I read somewhere that he was once in consideration to play Jim Morrison in the Oliver Stone movie, The Doors. Obviously that role went to Val Kilmer. I don't know how far that went, but it was a very interesting article I read in, I believe it was Record Collector, about Dwight Twilley and the career he had. And he made a bunch of music and went independent towards the end of his career, but never quite sort of broke through the way that he should have done. I love that record, and I, for sure, if I see any other Dwight Twilley albums out there in the wild, I'll grab them if the price is right, because this one cost me a grand total of $15. So for me, that was an absolute no-brainer. $15 was like 10, 12 pound to get a song that I absolutely adore on its album so I can hear the rest. Absolutely makes sense to me. And I've said this before in the past, I am not a big streamer, especially when it comes to experiencing music for the first time. If I want to hear something and I know it's on vinyl, that will be my preferred medium to hear it for the first time. I don't want to be clouded by a digital version, because to me, digital music does not sound as good as vinyl. It's as simple as that. It's quick and efficient and easy. That's what I love about, you know, takeout food. But takeout food isn't as good as the meal you prepare yourself. It's the same with vinyl. For me, if I sit down and listen to a record, that's how I want it to be. So that's why I didn't really check out any other Dwight Twilley before I picked up that album. But I am so glad I saw it. And again, just saw it in the wild, sitting in the D section. I thought, that's coming home with me. As I did with this next record. And now some of you may judge me. Please leave a comment down below if you think I'm off my rocker. But this record only cost me $6, okay? $6 that's peanuts. You're still probably going to be shaking your head, but Carl Douglas's Kung Fu Fighting and Other Great Love Songs. So we are all familiar with Kung Fu Fighting. The song came out in, what, 1974, and still to this day, people are very aware of Kung Fu Fighting. I saw this album, there were actually two copies in the bin. There was a $5.99 copy and there was a $10.99 copy. And the $5.99 copy, you can see like it's water stained, the sleeve is split at the top. Like this sleeve is not in great condition. The record has a lot of wear and tear, but it still sounds good. And the main reason I bought this record is because of that line of text. Kung Fu Fighting and Other Great Love Songs. So are we supposed to believe that Kung Fu Fighting is actually a love song? Is it a love song? I've been pondering this since I came home, and is Kung Fu Fighting a love song? I guess it could be. I mean, if you want to look at it that way. But anyway, I thought, well, I don't know actually any other Carl Douglas songs, apart from Dance the Kung Fu, which I believe was the follow-up to Kung Fu Fighting. So I thought for $6, it's got to be worth it, just so I can make this video, just so I can make this clip. I mean, look at that cover. Look at that. I mean, would you not pick that up for $6? And I thought, okay, right, well, let's have a look. And the second track on the album is called Witchfinder General. And that kind of had me piqued. I was like, okay, that's strange. Let me investigate this. And you know what I found? Past the Kung Fu songs, this is actually just a great 70s soul disco funk record. It's brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. The track Witchfinder General is so good and so funky, and we'll be making it onto many mixtapes that I plan to compile. But this was released on 20th Century Records, 1974, and as you can imagine, Kung Fu Fighting on this has seen lots of wear, but the rest of the album, not so much. Again, does have a few pops and clicks here and there, but for me that adds to the character of the LP. I mean, you can see there that Kung Fu Fighting has got some real issues, but does it affect playback? No, it doesn't. It's on the surface. Once you get into the grooves, all you can hear is sound effects and thumping bass, which is right up my alley. I want to hear Kung Fu Fighting. That's what I want to hear. Kung Fu Fighting, and I want to hear funky soul bass. And that's what you get when you get Dance the Kung Fu. The Kung Fu Fighting album. Kung Fu Fighting and Other Great Love Songs. I mean, it's almost like I want to, if I were to ever write a biography, maybe that would be the name, because I'm a big fan of Kung Fu movies and I do like love songs. So who knows? Who knows? But this is just a small sample of the albums I bought. Like I said, I bought back 31, I think it is, records. Some new and some old. And this record here, the final record I'm going to talk about on today's episode, this is one I have had my eye on for a long time, and it's War's Greatest Hits, which I'm sure everybody and their mother knows the track Lowrider, but War had some truly amazing songs that just do not get the kind of love and promotion as Lowrider. You know, Lowrider, they use that in TV shows and commercials, etc, etc. But you know, The World is a Ghetto, Cisco Kid, Why Can't We Be Friends, one of my favorite songs of all time, just absolutely brilliant. And this is a first US pressing. This has the gold cover. And this is from, when did this come? 1976. So, I mean, this album's older than TG. This album is 48 years old. Comes with a nice thick card in a sleeve. This is great soul, funk, I wouldn't say disco. It's not really disco, but it's groovy. It's got a real groove and a real crunch to it. And again, you know, for an album that is almost 50 years old, yeah, there is some wear and tear on it, but how does it sound? Absolutely phenomenal. And I don't know if you can tell, but like, I don't know if you can hear that well. This is not pressed on some 180 gram super high grade. No, this is just how records were produced, and it sounds amazing. 1976, and it sounds as good as the day it was pressed. I cannot get over how great actually this record sounds. I know there is a who is it? Is it Chris Bellman? I know the album has been recut recently. That's available now as a reissue, and it was cut on an all tube system. I think it's Chris Bellman. You can get a good copy of it now. You can, but this original copy cost me $10. So for $10, if it sounds great, I'm going to go for it. You know, the cover, yeah, it's seen better days, but it's really not the end of the world, because I buy records to listen to, not necessarily to look at. You know, if the artwork is great and the cover looks great, fine. If the artwork's a little beat, it's really not the end of the world. But how I collect records and how you collect records are two entirely different things. But why not leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of my somewhat varied selection. And, you know, I'll be back with some more. I'll maybe do some of the new records I picked up on the next episode of The Record Room. But if you haven't already liked this video and subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? It is absolutely free. And if you do so, you will never miss an episode of The Record Room. But until next time, stay gold and spin those blackest circles.